Lena Davis entered the entrance of Amadeus Davis Financial Bank branch. It was late when she created it years ago. Afternoon, with a low sun and the long shadows are spread across the sky by flooring made of polished marble. The automated as she stepped. Through the doors they whooshed open, trainers softly thumping against the ground while modifying her informal. She didn't have a cardigan over her shoulders. I'm available for anything big, no matter how urgent. No meetings with high-profile people. For business, customers just a disengagement from her own account. The type of transaction that anybody might make at any time. Davis Financial was the business on this particular day. Lena had constructed everything from the ground up, founded the bank with the conviction that accessibility and equity were crucial to deliver outstanding service over. She had guided it over those years, endless difficulties that are always centered one, ensuring that clients received this branch played a crucial role in her vision that she had personally authorized. Location managed the launch and even took part in the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Ceremony today. But she didn't have on. She didn't have high heels or a fitted outfit. Desire. To bring her to the notice of role, she was present just as the client wore a cardigan in. She walked up to the desk wearing trainers, a cool, collected manner. She wasn't present to show off her rank or indulge everyone her in a new way. She simply desired to certain that the bank she had constructed was just as it had always said it would be. Be behind the counter as the young teller. Didn't accept her offer right away, only a fleeting look before returning to the computer. Screen. Lena cleared her throat in the hopes of receiving, "Hello, I would want to build a withdrawal." Lena's voice soothed the Sophie Matthews. The teller didn't look up. Instead, he pushed a clipboard over the, "Please fill this out" counter. She asked. The figure, without glancing at Lena, was withdrawal of a basic name account number. Lena swiftly filled out the amount, putting $5,000 in writing. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. When Lena fell to warrant identification, the form returned. She saw a modification in Sophie's expression as her eyes darted across the form, followed by Lena's ID and back briefly to the screen. Sophie paused, because there was an awkward change in the atmosphere that is subtle but notable. "Could you wait a moment?" Sophie asked in a voice that was suddenly unsure. Took Lena's ID and vanished from view. A door with frosted glass leading to the Lena stood calmly in the back office, softly tapping fingertips against she anticipated a marble counter to be regarded with dignity. Yet this was change. After a short while, Sophia turned, but Brad wasn't by herself. The branch manager, Sullivan, trailed behind her. "Good afternoon," said Miss Davis. Brad. Stiffly smiling, he examined her. "Before concentrating on the shape, I recognize that you are withdrawing." "Yes, $5,000 from my account." Lena nodded. Brad paused, asking if I might have another look. Lena noticed a flash of light at your ID. I previously handed it to Sophie out of annoyance. "Brad," she stated in a stern yet calm voice. Choose not to respond to the statement. Exposing the ID to the light, it appeared as even though he was looking it over for any indications of deception. Notwithstanding, Lena had a relationship with Davis Financial. Brad paused for years before asking, What do you do for a living, Miss Davis?" Lena tensed when asked whether I manage a bank. Her voice was harsher now. Brad looked at Sophie and nodded softly before inquiring as to whether this is a personal or Lena's patience was wearing thin in business one. On the form, she can see it clearly. Brad turned the ID as she spoke in a cold tone, kept hiding his eyes over with his hands. Lena was beginning to understand contact, that this was not an error or Brad. The policy was about presumptions. The fingertips of Sullivan hovered above Lena's ID as though he were looking at the tiny print, or holding out for anything to catch the eye. As usual, the lobby had become quieter. The bustle of activities gave way. To Lena's forbearance in the awkward pause was out of style, yet she preserved her expressionless refusal to provide them. The joy of demonstrating to her, Sophie stood silently by her in frustration. Her gaze flits between Brad and Lena. Didn't talk, and her stance was rigid. There was a noticeable tension that Lena could sense. It gets more intense with each day that goes by. Second, She has encountered circumstances like as this earlier period when individuals questioned her authority or capacities, but never at this level. Brad glanced back at her in his own bank. Statement that is yet meticulously neutral. Mrs. I have a few more questions for you, Davis. Inquiries before to moving forward with the deal, he stated in a suave voice, but mixed with an unsettling substance. Lena made herself do it with her. Remain composed. But the subsequent question was more than a bit inappropriate, and to be clear, this is the first time. Brad requested his words when banking with us. Nearly figured out Lena's stomach tensed up at the inquiry that this wasn't. She had opened the new branch personally, had approved each and every detail, personally authorized each employee's hiring worker, and even served as the ribbon cutter at the inquiry wasn't about the grand opening. The reason for the withdrawal was, otherwise, I've been banking here since today. With a branch open, Lena answered in a voice unflinching. Brad didn't instantly. He flicked his gaze toward Sophie in response. Prior to facing Lena again, he appeared to be closely examining what she said as when choosing how to handle this needless path of inquiry. Not until he spoke once more did Lene understood how far this was going. And you mentioned taking out $5,000. Brad spoke slowly, as if the total itself required justification. Can you tell me about your job, Miss Davis? Lena was surprised by the inquiry. What use did this serve her? Occupation isn't sufficiently defined yet. She had previously informed him that she worked at finance. She served as Davis's CEO. Did he really need more evidence, financial? I manage a bank, she said again. Feeling frustrated. The same bank you work for, Brad, but you were hesitant earlier. Posing a second query, this time more indicated the extent of Bank Lena's control over. The counter is tightened. She inhaled deeply, attempting to maintain. Her calmness wasn't only a habit. Verify that it was. A questioning, and she could sense the faint undertone of Brad's tone of judgment. I own this bank. According to Brad, Lena, I started her voice company. There was a time when Davis Financial quiet as Brad took in the burden of. The air seemed heavy after she spoke, and Lena might detect a change in his, looked at her, not only inquiring, he was testing her by asking her no more questions, seeking explanations for rejecting her request, after what seemed like a lifetime. Eventually, he glanced at the withdrawal slip underneath, and looking back at her, his face remained illegible, as I can see, but he spoke slowly. Lena was aware that he hadn't truly heard her. Is this a corporate or personal account? Lena's patience was on the verge of thread, which is her own account, answered, her voice now hardly controlled. You can see the form right there. What's up with Brad? Sophie shifting anxiously in his rear, but Brad didn't appear to care. He was examining the paperwork, tracing the details with his fingertips as if there was a problem. But Lena was aware that he wasn't searching for errors. He was trying to figure out how. To get her to, Lena arose to demonstrate that she belonged there. Intently observing him as she waited, she finished. She wasn't going to be in this game, seen as an outsider. Particularly in Lena's tolerance with her own bank was waning. She arrived at the branch anticipating a straightforward transaction, anticipating handled, just like every other client. However, this was no longer a straightforward request. This had become a test, and she was starting to observe the extent of Brad's willingness to push her. Then Brad took another look at the form. There was a halt, back up at Lena. The air felt tense, as though he was Lena, attempting to choose his. Next course of action crossed her arms and held her ground. Over her breast loosely, she wasn't going to give up right now. Consequently, you're taking $5,000 out of your. Brad carefully retold his personal tale. His gaze swept over her face as though attempting to ascertain if she would shatter as that. Yes, Lena nodded, her eyes unwavering. You've seen the state of everything. Brad, what's the problem? He didn't respond immediately, rather than turning the shape with his hands as though seeking a concealed defect. But there wasn't. There was no justification for this delay. Anticipating the additional scrutiny that Lena could experience, felt annoyance growing. But she didn't. Brad finally allowed it to show and glanced up at her, his face changing a little. I'm going to require you to confirm a few further details before we can go ahead and make this withdrawal. Lena blinked, perplexed by the new details. I've already given my ID for everything. What more can I do with my account number? Brad appeared to pause for a while, but you need pause. He then posed the query that, can you tell me what drove Lena over the edge? The sum of your most recent investment into this. Lena's mouth clenched at the talequery that wasn't part of the normal process. She was aware that it wasn't even typical. Ask for significant withdrawals if she had been taking out a sizable amount. Maybe. A second check would have been reasonable, but not for $5,000. But not for a client who has previously, since the bank's founding, I don't. Remember that number, Lena urged, attempting to remain composed, but you have my account number, which you may retrieve the details as you would for anybody. Otherwise, Brad didn't appear to hear her, only nodded as if he was taking in her information. Words. But his calculating gaze remained, as though trying to figure out how to make her demonstrate that she had access to her own funds. Lena realized the gravity of the situation when the uncomfortable quietness encroaching on. We take security extremely seriously. After a pause, Brad continued, almost as if practicing his next sentence, which is only Lena's hand on the counter as a precaution tightened a safety measure, which she repeated. Stupid, what are you trying to do? Brad didn't respond to this. Rather, he extended his hand to the desk. Taking a tiny clipboard. It's simply policy. We must confirm you're the account holder prior to us handling the withdrawal. Lena's thoughts were racing as she attempted to understand what was occurring. She had been approaching this. She has been opening the branch for years. There was no doubt about who she was, if she was able to access the account. So what was the reason for her treatment? In this manner, why was she required to demonstrate something so clear that you're stating that my account number is my ID, and I don't have a history with this bank? Enough, she said in a harsh voice. You're forcing me to demonstrate my entitlement. Brad didn't appear to want to spend my money, recognized the seriousness of what he was. It's merely a routine that he repeated. His voice was more aloof than Lena's ever was. She had been patient, but her eyes narrowed. She was going too far with this. She wasn't treated like a criminal. I will not stand for it here, I don't think this is true for her own bank. Said to herself, this has to do with security. Brad shifted uneasily. Otherwise, but he refused to give up and set the clipboard down, putting it across in front of her. The counter using the same coerced, you can complete the form out of courtesy. If you would want, he also set his voice. Seamless. It's only a step in the process. Lena remained still, not touching the clipboard. She just stood there, observing him, aware that this wasn't going to stop until someone took accountability for the events that were occurring. As she stood there, Lena's heart was pounding. Her patience had long since run out, and the truth of what was going on struck her like a blow. It wasn't about policy, but rather wasn't about safety, but rather something more profound, something that had unrelated to her account, or that she remained still during the transaction. Her annoyance was focused on Brad. Just under the surface, smoldering, she refused to complete any more forms. She had decided to stop playing. She did not play this game in her own bank. Brad replied, her voice growing icy and purposeful. This is absurd. I have assisted with this bank since day one. Now that you have opened this branch, you are creating me demonstrate my place here. Brad's did not alter, but Lena was able to see the slight change in his manner when he first appeared a little uneasy. Perhaps he had begun to acknowledge that this wasn't a straightforward miscommunication. Perhaps he was starting to recognize the person he was interacting with. Lena mentioned that she might want to double-check, steady yet quiet voice. Because I'm not. Brad didn't reply like any other consumer. He just stayed motionless as Lena taking a deep breath before dropping the shocking revelation. She grabbed into her purse, taking out her phone without damaging it. She started by making eye contact with Brad, documenting the growing quiet in the lobby. Lena could feel the tension in the air, sensed the other customers' gazes on her, feeling that something was going on, but not sure what. You're specifically refusing to enable me to access my personal account. Lena's voice was now clear and steadfast in spite of offering government-provided identity, but other clients aren't requested to supply. Brad's face went pale. If he did anything more. Something, but he didn't appear to reply. Taken by surprise and unsure of how to respond, the circumstances that Lena was presently taking. Lena took charge of it and moved the camera, now pointing it slightly in the direction of the security officer who had been standing. Her tone was quiet as she responded, "By and you. For what reason were you summoned over as well?" The security guard's specific rationale paused to look at Brad before he didn't say anything as he turned to face Lena, instantly evidently uncertain of how to. Lena didn't give him a chance to reply. To avoid the question, "Tell me why." "Have you noticed that the guard moved on his feet uneasy in her presence? I'm only here to ensure that everything goes." Eventually, his voice came out effortlessly, measured but unsure. "So be sure," Lena said. "Everything goes smoothly." Her tone was filled with incredulity. "Or are you here to scare me so that I recognize where Brad moved me to?" Uncomfortably, his eyes darted from the guard, and Lena are obviously confused about how to deal with the matter, but Lena wasn't finished. She spoke a little more softly, ensuring that it traveled throughout the space. "Brad, you've made a grave error." Brad made a huge error by pressing his lips onto AF. "You simply remain cool, Miss Davis." "Tight cue down," Lena interrupted him, her voice now frozen. "Brad, I'm okay, but you've obviously determined that I'm not welcome here. You've made your choice, and I'm going to now ensure that everyone is aware of it." Looked around the room one final time, making eye contact with the other patrons. They were now observing the conversation with focused concentration. She was able to observe the Don's realization that this was only a financial transaction. Brad, regarding something far larger, seeing that he had no escape route, he made a final and a frantic attempt. He reached beneath the clicking a button with a counter that conveyed. Alina understood just how to notify security. This indicated that there had been an increase in, was requesting backup for a short while. Later, a towering, uniformed security guard walked into the foyer, his hand hovered close to his unreadable belt, is obviously prepared to act, but Lena remained unfazed and maintained her position. Unwaveringly, "Lena, you're actually doing this?" inquired Brad, her tone calm despite the room's tension had nearly reached unbearable. Brad nodded sternly. Nonetheless, his face wavered. "All we want to do is make sure that everything goes well for all of our clients." He spoke in a too formal manner. "Too practiced." Lena arched an eyebrow. "Seamless encounter, huh? Well, Brad, I'll let you know that I won't be going till you handle my withdrawal, and let me know if I will stand here and let you till you have another person. So treat me like this." Something is causing the lobby to be silent. Lena stood erect, her eyes thunderous, centered on Brad, who appeared to be sweating a little from the strain. The security officer is still present at. The ready moved uneasily, uncertain of. Lena sensed the environment and knew what to do. Waiting for her next move, each client, every worker was either pretending not to look or being too scared to do so. Lena took a deep breath and steadied herself prior to speaking once more. "I'm going to say, Brad, calm yet keen, you're unwilling to do it again. Remove money from my personal account even though I supplied all the required documentation, and you're introducing security as if I'm the triggering a sighting, and for what reason? Due to my appearance, because I'm Brad isn't wearing a suit today." Expressiveness changed. The mask of professionalism is eroding ever so. He opened his mouth a little to say, "I don't know," but Lena interrupted him. "Want to hear any more justifications?" she stated. Her statements are unmistakably clear. "This is about Brad. You've determined that I'm not biased. Should be here. And it's too late for..." She held up her phone for you to mend, aiming it at him once again. "Brad, the chat is now on file. Everyone present is observing what is taking place at the moment. If you don't, I'm going to handle my withdrawal. Make sure everyone who needs to know is informed." Brad paused for a bit before continuing. He looked first at the security officer and then at Sophie. The teller had stopped talking. She avoided looking at the weight of Lena's. The air was heavy with words that she wasn't. She was only contesting his authority, pointing out the implicit bias that had been constructing all along. Lena moved forward, one more step, and spoke decreasing while maintaining an indisputable edge. Brad, I am the one who helped construct this bank. This branch's existence because I've personally authorized your employment here, and you're stating to me that in spite of that you're still unable to comprehend. Brad's face was devoid of color due to withdrawal. Once Lena realized the reality of what she had spoken, saw the panic scene as he opened his mouth once again, but nothing came out. It was too late to offer an apology. For clarification, allow me to introduce myself. In an appropriate manner, Brad, Lena said, her voice piercing the tension within the. She took a step back and grabbed for her identification, which was displayed on the before. She turned it over on the counter. Allowing the name to print on it gradually, she said, "Sink in, you see this tapping. This isn't her ID against the counter. Just any client's ID. This is the Davis financial founder and CEO. The Brad's realization came like a ton of bricks. The room was silent. Lena clearly didn't notice the manner in which the security guard cleared the path. The color faded from Sophie's face, and how patrons in the lobby changed. Brad's lips parted nervously, but he remained silent, emerged, his hands trembling a little as he tried to get Lena's ID. But he wasn't. Lena is no longer in charge of the issue, had taken back that authority, and he was obviously unprepared for what happened. I then constructed this bank from the ground up. Lena's voice remained steady and unwavering. I approved the budget. Brad, that's what got you this position, and I entered as a regular client. However, you acted as though I wasn't yours. Deceived me, embarrassed me, and now you have a decision that you can either this exchange or you can handle. Their percussions. Brad's mouth opened, but his mouth worked, but no sound came forth. Quietly, as he frantically attempted to regain his calm, but it was too. Lena responded, "You had your chance, late." Gentle yet forceful voice, "and you're leaving immediately." She turned to corporate to explain this. "As for you," she said to the security guy, said in a tone that was colder than usual, "if the initial stage is not disrupted by the consumer, should not intimidate you. Instead, you must be more cautious about who gives what directions. You comply with the security guard's instructions." His little uneasy nod was already acknowledged his error, and there was no. After returning from it, Lena looked at Sophie, who had been quiet the entire time, the most of the conversation. "And you," she said. She spoke softly but firmly. "And you noticed my ID. Even if you saw my account number, you nevertheless concluded that I wasn't worth hearing." Sophie's cheeks go red, and I merely followed her as she stuttered, "Procedure, ma'am." Lena took a step towards now procedure. The counter's tone was harsh. "It appears to be limited to individuals," such as Sophie was about to say something, but she stared down at her without saying anything. Despite her trembling hands, Lena took a pause to catch her breath and allow her words to sink in. There was a lot of anxiety in the air, yet she finished and made her point, turned and moved in the direction of the entrance, heels clattering on the glossy tile. There was an overwhelming hush in the bank, and as Lena entered the room, she realized that nothing would ever be the same. Swift was the following fallout from that day. Lena had previously planned an early urgent consultation with her supervisor team. Each branch manager was summoned for a quick customer service review policies, and in this instance, Brad was mandatory bias training was dismissed, executed in every branch, and a new system of accountability was implemented. Davis's finances changed right away. Workers grew increasingly conscious of their activities. Clients started to notice the distinction, and Lena ensured that this wasn't only a one-time adjustment. Lena was forever reminded of that day. Served as a reminder that change is not inevitable. From written statements or regulations, it occurs when someone stands up, refuses to acknowledge the problems and insists that things be corrected. And Lena Davis was the ideal candidate.